uncomfortable would be justified right now. Because no conversation that begins with "we need to talk" is going to be a pleasant one. But I want you to hold on to that unpleasant feeling, because this conversation is going to get a lot more uncomfortable. What if I told you that almost half of us here today are just one paycheck away from becoming homeless? According to Canadian Payroll Association, almost half of all Canadians live paycheck to paycheck, overwhelmed by debt, and little to no savings for emergencies or retirement. So when it comes to dealing with the most marginalized members of our community, those experiencing extreme levels of poverty, including homelessness, why is our response to them avoidance? Why are we so cold and distant to the people who are where we could be tomorrow? It's fear. The very fear that we could be there tomorrow. We can't imagine ourselves without food on our plate, roof over our heads, or access to the basic human rights we take for granted. Instead, it's much easier for us to be ignorant and blame someone else for the problem. That's what happens when you drop out of school. That's what happens when you do drugs. And that's what happens when you're too lazy to get a job. We create an us versus them barrier, our little bubble, to protect ourselves from the harsh realities of those experiencing poverty. We give ourselves permission to generalize, stigmatize, and dehumanize people who are experiencing homelessness and excluding them from our society. Over the last 10 years, I worked with many different nonprofit organizations, mostly in the area of working with marginalized members of the community. But most of those years, people experiencing homelessness never crossed my mind as marginalized or even needing help. Year after year, I watched the number of people living on the streets go up. And year after year, I walked past them, avoiding eye contact. I'd roll my eyes and think to myself, why don't they just go to one of the shelters or get a job and work for their money like everyone else? And why doesn't the government do something about it? But the truth was, I was uncomfortable. I was uncomfortable to make eye contact because it's really difficult to look at someone when they're at the lowest point of their lives. It wasn't until a little over 4 years ago when I joined an organization that helped people experiencing homelessness overcome their barriers and find stable housing, because I wanted to learn more. And working there changed the entire course of my career and the way I understand homelessness. I worked with seniors with severe physical and sometimes mental health conditions that can't even carry out the day-to-day tasks that we don't even think about. And despite that, they can't get onto disability. I worked with single moms with little kids who had become homeless, fleeing horrible domestic violence situations and horrific child abuse stories. And I worked with individuals that lost their income, lost their homes, and some even lost their families because they got laid off from their job or because they were injured in a car accident or work-related accident. And from this experience and this journey, I learned the most important thing, and it's that anyone can become homeless. In fact, some of the other things I learned were that many people experiencing homelessness aren't even on the streets. They're in shelters, in their cars, couch surfing with friends and family. And many of them that are on the street aren't there by choice. Most shelters are full or not equipped to deal with some of the high-need individuals that we have in our community. All it takes is just one life-altering event to create a snowball effect of depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress, combined with physical and mental health conditions to lead to homelessness. And when people become homeless, this is how we treat them. We take away places where they can find shelter from the environment. We take away places where they can use washroom. We take away places where they can sleep. We take away their ability to access food. And just when we thought that we couldn't sink any lower, we find a way to sink lower by reducing them to less than human beings. This way of treatment of people experiencing homelessness is not only inhumane, but it's also fiscally irresponsible. Because for every single person that gets sick or dies on the streets from illness, hypothermia, or overdose, costs us between $40,000 and over $100,000 per person per year. The average is around $53,000 per person. It backlogs our healthcare system, our child welfare system, our judicial system, amongst many others. Now, we know that what we're doing is not working. I knew something had to change, but I also knew that change had to start with me. Where had I gone so wrong that I missed an entire population of people needing help? And I realized the answer was in the environment I had created for myself. You see, what we hear, we tend to repeat. And what we like, share, or engage with on social media, we get even more of. And so when I understood this, I completely changed my environment. I started spending less time with people who are part of the problem and more time with people who are part of the solution. And I left every single social media group that's negative in nature and shames people for their poverty. I educated myself and was inspired to do an honors thesis on homelessness and public policy, looking for a solution. So the big question is, we know what we're doing is not working. So what if we were to take a completely different approach? One that's founded in compassion and empathy. It's humane, but also fiscally responsible. Lucky for us, no matter why someone becomes homeless, the solution is the same. It's the Housing First program. We like to believe that people need to earn a roof over their head and prove themselves worthy. But the Housing First program, it's counterintuitive but effective, and it turns this concept over its head and says that a roof over your head is a basic human right, just like food and water. Because when someone's living on the streets, they don't have the time to think about dealing with their addiction, dealing with their physical health problems, their mental health problems, their financial problems. They are in survival mode. And all they can think about is how to survive just one more day. And the Housing First program gives them the opportunity to live beyond survival, to be able to think a little bit further than how do I stay alive till tomorrow. And the good news is, in the long run, the Housing First program costs us about $22,000 average per high-need individual and $14,000 for low-need individuals. Imagine the next time you have to call an ambulance or police, either you or a loved one, and they show up to your doorstep a little bit more quickly because they're not dealing with people getting sick and dying on the streets. It could be the matter of life and death for our families as well. And that's what the Housing First program can do for us. And there are many places around the world that have ended homelessness through the Housing First program. The one closest to us is Medicine Hat in Alberta, who have reduced their homelessness to less than 1%. Now, it's our turn. Because the one thing that's in common between all the places that ended homelessness is a change in people's attitudes that are living there. Our government is taking a big stride forward in the right direction. Our province has invested $500 million into housing, and our city of Chilliwack is working tirelessly with local organizations to build supportive housing. So this is an example of modular units that are being built. So it's a small dorm room size space, and it's clean and provides a safe space for individuals. This one is the family center, and as the name suggests, it's focused at families and has units up to 3 bedrooms. And this one is the Waterstone building. These are some of the few buildings, and by the way, Waterstone building is also family-focused and has up to 4 bedroom units. These are based out of the Housing First program to help individuals and families with kids find affordable, safe housing, and then provide them with the right targeted solutions that people need to move forward with their lives, whether it's counseling, life skills, trauma care, medical support, any of that. So what's next? These supportive housing are great and much needed. It's about time. But we can do better. See, the problem with an entire building that's supportive housing is that a person on the streets can walk up and say, look, that's where they house poor people. And look, that's where they house people who have drug problems. As long as we can identify a person's low, or as long as a person's low socioeconomic status can be revealed by the building that they live in, we can't make progress with the destigmatization of poverty. Instead, we need to think a little bit more long-term and with purpose for our community of Chilliwack and any community who may be listening to this talk in the future. One of the ways is inclusionary zoning, where we work with landlords and property managers and make a small percentage of most multifamily rental units and turn them into supportive, subsidized housing for individuals experiencing multiple barriers, and apply the same concept, but spreading them out a little bit more. That way, they can be part of the community and they can feel included. But beyond policies, there's a lot of things that we as individuals can do to make a difference. For example, we can start with something small, like saying people experiencing homelessness instead of homeless people. The first one recognizes them as human beings, and homelessness to be a temporary situation that they're in. And the second one makes homelessness a label and an identity. By making little changes like this in our lives, we can make big impacts in our community in the direction of empathy and compassion. And with empathy and compassion, we can create inclusion. And with inclusion, We can end homelessness. Thank you.